Everything I learned about being a woman, I learned from a man.
This is one of the reasons I felt so passionate about my career, because I'm like, why is it the case that someone at 40 could come to me and say that she doesn't understand her period? It's because we learn it in school at 12 years old, and then nobody mentions it again.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Unapologetically Yours is a place where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationship and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world when we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. And I am so happy to have a guest here today. We met in the fall at a Gateless Writing Retreat, and instantly I was like, this is my sister. Love this woman. I knew that there would be lots of opportunity for us to collaborate in the future, and inviting her here is a dream. I want to introduce to you Dr. Rishma Walji.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so excited to be here with you, Ashley. This is going to be great.
So tell us a little bit about your background and expertise, because you've got so much to share beyond being a naturopathic doctor, PhD, years in clinical practice. You are a whole ass woman, a mother. You have so much wisdom to share. So tell us who you are.
Oh, thank you. I definitely do have the science background, but also I'm a woman and I'm a human and I'm a mom, and I have stress and I worry about my kids, and just like, I think everyone else out there, we sort of try to figure it out. But I think in the background of my healthcare journey, being in healthcare for over 20 years, I spent a lot of time helping people make very complex decisions about hormones, about health, about life. And I loved it. I loved working with patients. I loved my job. I really loved being an advocate for women. But as time went on, I realized that, especially as I took on more complex cases, I realized that it was really hard, because as women go through many things as we do, hormonal changes or pregnancy or fertility and things that I used to focus on in practice, the people who were coming in were getting kind of pushed against a wall, like they were having less time, less options, the things that were being made available to them because we have all of these changes in our bodies. And it started feeling like options that were given to them were not options at all. They were not actual true decisions that they could make. And that was really frustrating to me, because I would hear, I wish I met you 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, how can I sort of get earlier on in the journey and even bring it beyond healthcare, and not just in the clinical space, but also in life? Like, how can we start making decisions in a more intentional way? And I think the biggest thing that I found that really is inadequate, I think, is the way that people get advice about decisions and the decisions that they have. Because a lot of it is like, logic, you have to be productive, you have to be efficient. And that's inadequate, because we have so many decisions that are emotional. I mean, in 20 plus years working with women, Ashley, like, I don't recall very many decisions that were not full of emotion, right? Like, we're not talking about what to have for dinner. We're talking about, do I have another child? We're talking about, do I leave my family so I can move somewhere and be with the person that I love? We're talking about, do I take a promotion and then possibly leave my kids behind at home and not spend time with them? Or do I leave my career, this ambition and this identity that I have, in order to take care of my kids? Like, everything is emotional. There's so much emotion.
Oh my gosh. And like, the thing that is so on my mind right now is like, gosh, we tend to treat policy, healthcare, so many things as black and white. And it is just not the case, because there are so many factors. I mean, even if you look at like trying to figure out like an elimination diet, like it's an easy one. It's like, okay, so you eliminate some foods to try to figure out your allergy, but then you're not factoring in the fact that you're taking XYZ medication or getting zero sleep or smoking cigarettes behind your garage or whatever other things that can impact a person on a daily basis. Deep trauma, stress, the whole spectrum. And it's not a one size fit all. And when you think about healthcare, decisions that people are making about their bodies, it goes so much beyond a just simple, this is your option and go decide. Because we're forgetting about the human and all of the factors that play into being human.
Yeah. And the other thing that really, I think I noticed in practice, and I think it really I'm trying to advocate for, is for people to understand that decisions are not a moment in time. Like we think, I have to make this decision. Is it right or is it wrong? And so often there's gray, but also it's a process. It's not a pivot point. Like there are so many things that come after that decision. Even when you make it, you have to deal with all of the, the emotional fallout, the sacrifice, the change that happens after making that decision. And especially for women, when we have a biological clock and we have kids and we don't have time to handle our own perspectives, we just kind of keep going. You're laughing because I'm sure you've gone through this as we all have.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And it's that intersection between like reality and truth and trust and all of the things that play into our day-to-day lives. And then desire. Like most people just they end up doing whatever the fuck they want to do at the end of the day. But it's giving them the informed information, and the choices, and then the trust to go out into the world and live the life that they're going to live.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up trust because I feel like, especially for women, I'm sure it happens to men too, but definitely more so for women because we go through so many changes in life and because we have hormones and because we go through puberty, we have perimenopause. And also, if you've had kids, you go through pregnancy, you go through like there's so many different changes that we go through. And I
Yes.
feel like this trust piece is really, really hard. One, to trust our bodies, but also we're sort of told what to do. We're sort of told, this is how you should feel, this is how you should show up, this is how you should behave. And so we stop trusting ourselves, we start questioning, oh, did I do this right? I must have made a mistake. Oh, now I feel guilty. Oh, I should have done that. And we sort of get clouded with all of these other feelings and expectations of ourselves. And that really impacts how we look at the future of our lives and our future decisions.
Oh my gosh, that feels so true to me. And it's like, well, especially for women, like, let's break it down for a second. One, we have the societal expectations. And that's one thing. All of the should statements, the pressure that is absolutely can be crushing. And so I actually like started to ask myself recently, I like kind of had this epiphany that everything I learned about being a woman, I learned from a man. So let's like think about that and examine it. So we look at even growing up at the time when you and I were growing up, all of the TV shows were written by men. So how they were portraying women, the advertising was written by men to help women feel a certain way. The medical research conducted was by men for men. And then we think about our mothers and the societal expectations that came from men to teach them how to mother, how to show up in the workplace, how to be polite, to not be angry, to make peace in the world without that full representation of the spectrum of what it means to be a woman. And as I chewed on that for a little bit, and I was like, well, fuck, that's a big thing that we have to unravel. So like, what's the main characteristic that defines womanhood? And I think that's intuition. But when that is so clouded, or I guess I could say feminine energy, is that intuition, that inner voice, that inner knowing. But when that voice is so clouded by noise, by expectation, by the full plates that so many of us have, it becomes really hard to know what's mine, this person, Ashley, what's yours, and what's coming from someone else.
Yeah, for sure. This happens all the time. This is one of the reasons I felt so passionate about my career because I'm like, of course, why is it the case that someone at 40 could come to me and say that she doesn't understand her period? It's because we learn it in school at 12 years old and then nobody mentions it again. And we don't ask questions and we're not allowed to talk about it and we don't get any information. And I'm like, you have a right to this information. This is your body. You should understand what's going on in your body. We should be allowed to talk about it. We should be allowed to ask questions, and we don't. And it's a very taboo topic, especially, I think everywhere, but especially in certain cultures. We don't talk about these kinds of things. And of course, we're not going to trust ourselves. We don't understand ourselves. We think that what's happening in our bodies or what's happening in our minds is abnormal most of the time. And we're not, even if you just think about work, right? Like, or going to the gym, you have your period or something, and it's like, oh, I still have to perform at my best. Nobody even knows. I was actually listening to one of your podcast episodes when you talked about your history with miscarriage. Can I just say, first of all, it was such a powerful episode, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But I was listening to you talk, and I was like, this happens all the time. You will be sitting across the table from somebody and you will be going through something devastating, something traumatic, and that person will have no clue what you're going through. And this happens to women countless, countless times.
Oh my gosh, that is, well, first of all, thank you so much. And it's actually interesting because the anniversary of my most recent miscarriage is tomorrow. And so I've been reflecting on it quite a bit. And the interesting thing to me is like even coming down to periods. So let's talk about that for a second. I was this many years old, the like late 30s, early 40s, when I started to understand the phases of the cycle. Like, what does it mean to be in the ovulation phase? And what does that do for my energy and how I show up in the world? And what does, when I'm in the luteal phase, what that does for me? And like, and figuring out, like, once I started to track that, like, women are a 28-day cycle of change, and that what is happening to us during our own cycles or the phases of the moon, depending on if you're postmenopause, is really, really interesting in terms of how we view ourselves, how we respond to things, our energy, and noting that like my self-loathing during like my luteal phase is just like bleh. Started to know that, and then I could be like, ah, that's that little voice talking to me, and maybe I shouldn't make a big decision right now, or trying to schedule important meetings or things around like being in the ovulation phase where I'm showing up a little bit fucking cuter and happier. And it's like, how are we not teaching this to our kids? And also, don't get me started on like hiding tampons up your sleeve to go to the bathroom when it's more than 50% of the population
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
women.
I have to say, I'm very strong about this in my family. I have two teenage daughters, and I talk about this stuff all the time. My poor younger daughter, I was having a conversation with her the other day about, sex and periods and all this stuff. And we were talking, she was very uncomfortable, right? And we're talking about it. And I just like use all the words and I talk about everything very, very openly. And she's like, do we have to talk about this? Very uncomfortable. My older daughter, who's been through it all, she's listening from the other room. She's on her computer and she looks over and she calls out to us, well, calls out to her sister, you better get used to it. She's not going to stop. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not going to stop because this is a conversation that needs to be had and needs to be had often and frequently. And you need to know that the door is open for you to ask any sort of question. And my husband, bless him, was like, I'm a father of daughters. Like, tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I should say. And I was like, yes, thank you, because this conversation has to be had.
It's just so true. And I think about like, okay, so our responsibility as women who are waking up to all of the things that were, again, taught to us, that were learned by men, like that's our culture. It's a reality. And by the way, I'm not faulting the women who came before us. They did exactly what they needed to do to
And they
survive.
didn't know. Yeah.
Or didn't know, but we are where we are. Now we have access to more information, more understanding. And as women, we have the chance to change the way that we're teaching our daughters. I mean, even coming down to like bullshit things like that boy is mean to you because he likes you. Fuck that. Those kinds of things, that's not what we should teach our daughters to accept. And the same thing when it comes to knowing and understanding our bodies. And I think that that's amazing. You're an amazing mom.
Hopefully my kids will realize that at some point when I'm embarrassing them.
It was funny because my mom and I had this like tremendously open relationship, and I was a wildly curious child and said whatever came to mind and asked her tons of questions about periods and sex and other things. And I got the information that she was capable of sharing, not going down to phases and all of those things and the shame that we carry and yada, yada, but the information that she could share. And then I went on to educate everyone. All of the 7th grade girls learned about periods, sex, everything from me. And that was my role. And so my mom's girlfriends can thank her because they didn't have to have those big conversations with their daughters because they had me. But a 13-year-old girl is not the best educator about all the things that are happening and will happen to a woman's body. And like you said, like we're changing. We changed, like going from starting your first periods to going into pregnancy and all the hormonal changes that happen there, then going through birth and then postpartum, then riding that wave into perimenopause, which is a whole nother thing, and into menopause.
Yeah. And it's the Wild West. We don't talk about it enough. And also, this is the other thing I think we don't talk a lot about. And this is what I'm really interested in with my writing now with decision making. We have a lot of how should I describe this? There's a word for when something happens to you and you didn't want it. Like something bad happens, someone dies, there's grief. There's a word for this, right? We experience grief. We don't maybe in society know how to handle it. We maybe don't talk about it enough, but there's a word for it. People understand that you've been through it. And then you go through being a woman, let's say you've had a miscarriage and nobody knows. And that's another very difficult thing to have a word, but not really know how to describe it, not really know how to express it. This is something that I used to coach women on a lot. But there's another really special kind of pain that no one talks about and no one has a word for. And this is something that I'm really fascinated about and trying to give a word for in the book eventually that comes out. And that is the kind of loss that we choose because we make choices in our lives. And in order to do something that is important to us, we also have to sacrifice something else.
Mm.
And so I'm at the moment calling it chosen loss. And we don't really have a way to grieve that. We don't really have a way to express that because we feel guilty. Like I chose to have kids and I would never change that choice. I love my children. I wanted my children. I desperately, tried to have them. And still I gave up a lot and I would do it again. But that doesn't mean I don't miss that independence, that ambition, that privacy sometimes, like
Right.
there are things that we go through, I think more so as women because of the nurturing aspect, because of the hormonal changes, because of our body changes. I'm not as productive when I'm pregnant. Of course, I'm building an actual human in my body. Why do I think I can be, quote unquote productive, right? But it changes not just how our life unfolds, but also who we are. We change along that process. And that's the piece that I think we not only don't talk about, but we don't acknowledge. Instead,
Mm.
we just feel bad about it. I shouldn't feel this way.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. And like, so as you're describing that, I mean, so many things are going through my head. Like, for example, I mean, people saying things like, well, you chose it. You chose to have 3 kids in rapid fire. And it's like, okay, yeah, I did, of course. And I love my children, all of those things. And I need to take a walk. And that need doesn't take away from that I wanted to be a mother.
Yes.
And it's one of those things too that when we have so much, again, like coming down to that societal pressure and those expectations about how we should be and how we should show up, that it doesn't create a lot of that space for the truth, the radical honesty and authenticity. And really, I like, maybe let's look at like how we sugarcoat things. Like, okay, pregnancy, we look at, okay, this is this wonderful magical time. You're growing a human, you've got the glow. And then there's all of this redirecting towards building the perfect nursery and the perfect registry and all of those things. But we are not talking about all of the ways that that you completely lose who you are and have to rebuild that you can do that with choice and intention. But when we bypass the truth about womanhood, when we bypass the truth about motherhood, when we bypass the truth about our whole selves, then we're missing the chance to grow together, because through that truth, we find alignment, we build trust with other people, and we can advance the conversation about what our actual needs are as a society, as women.
Yeah. And the actual needs is so important. I call this the void. Like I used to see this in practice a lot. I still see it now, but I'll give you an example. I used to work with fertility patients and they would, of course, be going through a lot in order to have kids, right? They would be trying for years and they would be poked and prodded. And there's all sorts of things that happen in the fertility world that really don't get acknowledged. Like this woman might be working and going to appointments every other day, like it's just so intense. And so I would have these women who would get pregnant and then have their baby. And then they would come in, say their baby's 2 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. And they would be struggling with something, sleep deprivation, stress, all the things that moms go through that are normal. And they would all come and say to me the same thing. I am so grateful that I have this child. I don't want to complain. And I would say, you have this child, yes. And you're grateful, yes. And you worked hard to get here, yes. And that still doesn't take away the fact that you feel this challenge, this pain, this missing of your independence, this change of your body, this sleep deprivation, the things that you've given up in order to get here. That's what I call the void. And it happens almost in every emotional, complex, difficult decision. I have someone who left her family and went across to a different country to marry someone she loves. And she's like, I love this guy, but also I miss my family. And I'm like, both of those things can be true. You chose one thing and then you feel something that you miss. This is what I call the void, where you fall into this almost like a well of like, I don't want to call it depression because it's not medical depression, but it's almost like you feel a little bit lost, a little bit unappreciated, a little bit untethered in this sort of void of a valley. And you realize
Yeah.
I miss all of these things. And what's really devastating to me is a lot of people will then look back and say, did I do this wrong? Did I make a mistake? Did I choose the right person? Should I have lived over there instead? Should I have tried harder? I should have done this instead of what I did. And really, what we need to do is climb out of the void on the other side and emerge into the person that made those choices, made those sacrifices, but acknowledges the pain and then fills that void or climbs out of that void because we all feel it. Even for people who choose something that they would, I have some patients who chose not to have kids, but then they see someone else who has a kid and they made the choice, but they also see this other person and they kind of feel bad because they're like, oh, this person's, sort of shoving it in my face or whatever. There's all these emotions and they go into this void. Did I make the right choice? Are people judging me? All of these things. And it's like, those emotions are valid. Those emotions are
Yeah.
real. And we don't want to get stuck there. And it's not just about being grateful. It's not just about gratitude. It's not just about comparison. You're feeling emotions that are complex and opposite, and that's okay. And now, how do we become a person that can experience all of those things, but also keep connected to the vision that we had in the first place?
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. When I think about too, like even just am I allowed to feel this way? Am I allowed to ask for more? Am I allowed to ask for something different? And thinking about like even like marriage, for example, it's like, okay, so you're maybe not in an abusive relationship. You've got kids, you've got money, you've got the things, you check the boxes, and also realizing that it's not what you need. You as this
Yes.
individual person. And is it better than maybe someone else who's in a could be shittier situation, abuse, poverty, all of those things? So we tend to say like, how dare I ask for more? How dare I ask for different? And I think that keeps a lot of people stuck,
Uh-huh.
deeply stuck in not listening to their own inner wisdom about what will work for them and what the path forward is to joy, happiness, being on the other side of that void. And I think I love the word. I love the void. I love the void because
Thank
like
you.
I look at my life right now, like recently, you know, in the middle of a divorce, and it's deeply painful and difficult. And there's so many things that I'm grieving right now. What could have been, why this is so
Yes.
hard, how dare I, missing time with my children who I adore, while simultaneously being like, wow, okay, I can take care of my needs. I can do the things I need to do in the time when they're gone. I can dream a little bigger. I can dream differently. I can do these things. I can carve the life that I want to. I'm climbing out of the void, but there is, many people who are like, well, are you sure? Or other people who are like, yeah, it doesn't matter the nuance, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at women and our own expectations, we are allowed to choose different.
Yeah,
We are allowed to
we are.
choose alignment and whatever what might look like.
It's interesting when you talk about comparison or even advice that people give you. It's very interesting because everyone's life is different. First of all, we are allowed to choose whatever we want. We get to play this game of life according to our own rules. And I call this the outside problem because if I'm very determined about what I want in my life, and then all of a sudden I go inside my house, I'm like, I know this is the right decision for me. I am connected to myself. I know exactly what's going on. I feel all of these emotions, but I'm clear that this is what I want. And outside, and people give me their opinions and they tell me what they think. And it's out of context because it's their life, their perspective, their opinions. And their good advice all of a sudden becomes very bad advice for me because it is not
Yes.
my context. And then I think, okay,
Context.
how do I stay secure in me, trusting me and my choices when I go outside into the world, right?
Oh my
Because
gosh.
that's when you see the comparison. That's when you hear people's judgments, when you hear people's opinions. And it's like, how do I, first of all, get aligned with myself, which is the making the intentional choice? And then how do I stay there when I get out into the world? And I think that is the piece that we need more support in that area. That's the piece that I'm interested in.
I love this. And you have so much background and experience working firsthand with women through all phases of major transition. So
Yeah.
now, as you think about intentional decision making and what you're focused on now, what are the key tenets of that intentional decision making?
Yeah. There's actually a few. The first one is really getting clear on what you want. A lot of people don't know what they want. And most of the time, it's because we are thinking about what we should want, what other people want for us, what is okay to want. And sometimes we even predetermine what we can have based on what our life context is, what our life circumstances. And so I have this process that I use at home, and we have this big whiteboard. My husband and I, we draw all over this whiteboard, and I call it decision boarding. And not like a vision board, but we actually create this board of like, this is all the things we want, this vision board. I have a whole process of like pressure testing it. Like, is this what I want, or is this what somebody else wants for me? Is this
Ooh,
what
ooh,
I
I'm going to
want?
come back to
Or
that.
yes, is this what I want? Or is this what I think I should have? Is this what I want? Or is this what my ego is telling me that I need? Because I want to make decisions based on the things that I actually, and sometimes it's the ego, right? Like I did all my degrees because my parents, they were in a different country and they got everything taken from them and they had to move, and they're like, education, nobody can take that from you. And so I had a certain belief about my education, and that's okay. And I recognized that I had that belief and it was important to me. And also I wanted a little bit of, I want people to listen to me. I want people to know that I know what I'm talking about. But now when I left my practice, and now I'm like, oh, that part is not important to me anymore. I don't want to make decisions based on whether people are going to listen to me or not. I know I have something of value. I don't want to make decisions based on scarcity mindset. I know that my parents went through a lot, but I'm in a different place than they are. I have privilege that they didn't have. And so you make these choices along the way, and then you get to update your perspective. And so we have this whole process of figuring out what we want, pressure testing it, and then working as a team. Because if you're in a partnership or in a family, you can't always do it alone. Like I can't just decide this is what I want and not have my partner on board, right? Like we have to be there for each other. So it's a process, but I feel like that is the key, really understanding what we want, why we want it, and then really moving forward.
So I love this so much. And so I'm very big in things like breathwork, sound, meditation, trying to tune in and listen. But the where I get the most information is through my body response. And so trying to teach myself things like, okay, what feels like a yes and what feels like a no? Does it stir up, turn on, excitement? Ooh, like sure, there might be nerves, but like, is this a yes? Is this a yes? And then comparatively, does it inspire dread, doubt? Like you can feel the difference of like that positive and negative energy in your body when you kind of clear out and turn off those cute busy brains that we so often have and really trust, but like being radically honest, radically authentic with yourself to determine like, am I lying to myself? What are the other factors? And so do you have any tips to like help
Yes.
people get into the real, like, is this true?
Yes. Well, first, I'm going to say that you are unique in that not everyone knows how to listen to their body. Not
Well, it was a
everyone.
journey. I did not
Yeah.
like I made so many decisions out of fear, scarcity, misalignment. And then when I showed up to my life and was like, oh my gosh, everything is not where I want it to be. And then I had to untangle every part of my life over the last several years. So
So
it
then
was
I
a
would
journey.
ask you, and I have some tips too, but I would ask you, like, how did you start listening to your body? How did you learn to do that? Because I don't think it's easy.
This is such a good question. I think for me, just a little bit of of background. I had all the things. I had started my own business. It was multi seven figure business, and had was married, had three little kids, lived in a great community. But for me, what I started to realize, I call it like my Jumanji drum. It was just this constant feeling that something's not right, something's off. And so I did a few things, like I stopped drinking alcohol. And that was one way to like kind of carry my threads from one day to the next without interruption. And that allowed me to feel my feelings and notice, okay, how do I feel around certain people? Are they making me feel good? Are they making me feel like the ick? And then I could stop doubting, is this me? Am I the problem? Did I say something? Did I do something? Because I was never losing track of where I was in situation. Also, writing. So gateless writing. So another more context. Dr. Rishma and I met on a gateless writing facilitator training in Connecticut in the fall. And gateless writing is just creating a space where you can be radically authentic without judgment, and that your inner voice and whatever is coming out on the page is actually separate from you. It's art, so that you can examine the things that come to mind and write them out freely without worry of the judgment or the critic, so that you can start unlock radical truths about yourself is one avenue. And I use that as I was writing. I was realizing like all these spots where I didn't feel loved, where I didn't feel supported, where I didn't feel like I was in alignment with my truth, from my business to marriage to even coming down to how, like, was I raising my kids in a way that felt truly authentic to me? So I asked myself some hard questions, and then learning to trust my body was the next part of it, through yoga. Like, I couldn't have a busy brain and do a tree pose. And so learning to kind of silence my body, but then tuning into like, okay, what was a body? Yes. Starting with little things. Do I want pizza? And I couldn't always answer. It was like, I want pizza because I know they want pizza. So be like, what? No, I want pizza. What do I want on pizza? Not because what I know that they want on pizza. So anyway, started to get just like radically authentic with the tiny things, and then using those tools and those emotions to crack into the bigger things.
You're bringing up so much here, because I find so many women that I work with will say, I know what everybody around me wants. I know what every single other person around me wants because I take care of all of them, but I don't always know what I want. And so everything you said, I think it's a journey for all of us. Even I had to go through this journey too. The first tip I usually give people is to pay attention. Pay attention to your body, pay attention to your reactions, pay attention to your patterns. Just pay attention and do it in a way that is not judgy, that is not, just be curious about yourself. It's really hard sometimes. It's really hard. Like when I yell at my kids, I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. And then you start beating yourself up and you start thinking all these negative things. But really, I'm like, oh, why did I do that? What bothered me about that interaction? Like, just pay attention that, oh, I seem to always react in this kind of situation. Or what I used to tell my patients, pay attention to your body. When your body is usually trying to tell you something, we just don't understand the language that it speaks. Like if you think about just your kids or, a partner or a friend, we all speak the same language. Like we're speaking English. Like my husband and I will argue sometimes. And I'm like, we're both speaking English. We just don't understand what the other person's trying to say. And we're so busy saying what we want to say. Your body has a language and we don't speak the language of our bodies, right? So I usually say, pay attention to your body and learn the language that it is trying to tell you. And this, is it a yes or is it a no? This full body, a lot of people talk about this with intuition. And I, for a long time, had a really hard time with this, because sometimes my yeses and nos, and I've seen it in a lot of patients, especially people who are like me, very like type A, we have to do this, we have to do this. Sometimes it's like an expectation or a fear, or it's like, oh, I don't want to do that because that makes me uncomfortable. Does that mean it's a no? Or does that mean actually I should pay attention to this? So I always dial it back, especially if you're not a person who yet can do this and really understand herself. I usually start with just paying attention without judgment, just notice, just be curious. And then I ask myself, well, where is it coming from? When does it happen? What are the patterns? Because then you can start to unpack. Did I always get a headache at the beginning of my cycle? Or, oh, do I always yell when my kids are rude to me? Why do I think that that's being rude? Maybe they're thinking something out. Like it's sort of a curiosity of like, where did this come from? Why is this a pattern? Because this is something else that I think is super fascinating about the brain. 90% of our decisions are subconscious. 90%. We don't even realize that we've made a decision, but our brain has already figured it out. And so being intentional with your choices, and we think we have conscious choice, but really a lot of it is patterns and habits and, past beliefs and things like this. And so just asking yourself these questions, where did it come from? Am I thinking, no, I don't want to do this because it's a boundary issue, in which case I shouldn't do it? Or is it because I'm afraid? Just asking yourself those questions and really sitting with it, being quiet, which was really hard for me. Yoga is a really great way. For me, I struggled for many years, but now I'm finally meditating. It took me many, many years to get in touch with myself enough and quiet my brain enough to get there. In fact, it was such a hard thing for me that I actually did a whole podcast episode on meditation for people who can't meditate, because I was like, I am struggling and I cannot do this.
Link that in the show notes for sure, because it's the same. And so many people feel that.
Such a hard thing to do. And then the last piece, and I think I already touched on it, but is self-compassion, right? And this is another thing that's really hard for many of us, and myself included, is just not to judge myself and not to feel bad about anger, fear, any kind of emotion that I'm feeling, not to feel bad about it. And just to say, I'm feeling this for a reason. Where is it coming from? What is my body trying to say? What have I experienced that is making me go through this reaction in this moment? And just really feeling compassion for that. And I feel like if we can get to a place where we can understand our body, our minds, and just have a little bit of quiet and space, which we never take time for that, then I think we can really tap into that self-knowing, that
Oh my
self-confidence.
God. Okay, so here's my question for you. I agree with everything that you're saying. It is so important to be gentle with ourselves. We don't do that. Like, we're so in our critic and so stuck in judgment and expectations and all of those things. And then, but what I'm wondering about is in a time when, especially for working parents and talking mostly about women now, when our plates are so full, managing everything from kids to careers to those expectations, how do you create the space to be gentle, to listen, to
This is such
explore?
a good question. Such a good question. And I don't know if I have a good answer for it, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I look at my coping strategies because there are things that I do when I'm feeling stressed that probably are just helping me manage my stress. And some of them are good for me and some of them are not good. And so usually what I do is I start by asking myself, what do I need right now? Not necessarily what do I want, but what do I need right now? Do I need to be scrolling on my phone? Do I need to take a nap? Do I need a walk? And sometimes I listen and I do what I need, and sometimes I do what I want, right? Like sometimes I'll just, have the chocolate or whatever else that's a coping strategy for me that has helped me manage stress. But I spend a lot of time really building coping strategies that fill my cup, so to speak.
Mm,
And I don't just mean self care, take time for yourself in that superficial way, but like, what do I actually need? And sometimes, for a long time, it was sleep. And I refused it. I felt like I was going to jail. I was like, I want time alone. My kids are finally asleep. I mean, now they're teenagers and they stay up later than I do. But sometimes when they were young, I was like, I need this time to myself. And it felt like I was going to jail. But I recognized that for me, sleep was the thing I needed. And it was what I call a domino effect, where everything would go to shit if I didn't sleep. Like everything would just fall apart. I would eat poorly. I would yell at people. I was grumpy. Everything just fell apart. I wouldn't want to exercise. Where for my husband, for example, exercise is his domino thing, right? Like if he exercises, he sleeps well, he eats better. And so we have to find the thing that helps us build capacity, build energy, build the space, the time, the ability to handle all of the stuff that happens around us. So when people
right.
tell me, "Oh, you have to fill your cup, you have to put your mask on before you put everybody else's," and I was like, it's so hard to hear that because my kid's up at 3 a.m. I'm not going to be like, "Sorry, I need sleep." Like
Yeah.
I'm
Go the
getting
fuck
up
to
with
sleep.
I'm getting up with my kid. So it's
Yes.
not easy to do that. But then that morning when I wake up super tired, then I would say, what do I need today? And then if I am able to answer, not every day can I answer that question well, or can I listen to myself? But if I'm able to listen to myself, I can say, it's okay if I'm not productive today. It's okay if I lie down. It's okay if I leave the dishes in the sink. Because what
Mm.
do I need today? I need rest. And so that's how I'm creating space. It's not easy. I'm not perfect at it. I'm getting better as I move into sort of perimenopausal years. I'm realizing I have less option. Like I cannot do it unless I'm listening to myself, because this is like, it's the Wild West. It is no joke. Your body takes over and all sorts of things are happening. And I'm like, oh, I don't have a choice. I need to listen to myself now. And so it's kind of empowering to say, this is what I need. And I feel so much better when I do it.
Wow, I love that. That's such good insight in itself. And trying to be honest with yourself about the need versus the want. And that's something that I'm going to definitely take with me just to try to figure out, like, how can I create a little bit more space? How can I give myself just a break? And not just a break in terms of like sitting on the couch or taking a nap, but just recognizing that it's okay to not be fully productive. It's okay. And gosh, we're so hard on ourselves, thinking about
Yeah.
that endless to-do list and the things that are left on it instead of focusing on the things that you did do. And
Mhm.
we tend to think about the things we didn't do. But when you think about what you need, it really changes the conversation because it makes it about your whole self
Yes.
and creates that space and creates that ease. So that's amazing. So I read this recently and I want to share it with you that there are 3 species on Earth that go through menopause: elephants, killer whales, and humans. And the reason for that is that the women then who are done being baby makers can then lead, guide, and teach. And elephants, for example, they pass down their pathways and where they're walking to different watering holes and finding their way through the Sahara. They pass down that knowledge through the generations. And same goes with killer whales and their hunting strategies. And I don't know if you've ever watched some nature shows about killer whales and how they hunt, but it's like, they're mean, they're fierce, and they're fucking effective. And they teach each other how to do that. And then I started to think about women and how we have, over the course of time, stopped valuing the crone, stopped valuing the woman once she's not super young and prime baby making years, and noting that like women in their 40s, women in their 50s, like how much wisdom that they have, and then going into the grandmothers and the older women, and how much we're not leaning into that knowledge and those resources and that truth. Well, I'm going to stop and let you react to
I have
that.
so much to say about this.
Tell
Oh
me.
my gosh. I come from a culture where we revere the expertise and wisdom of age. And I don't think that that's the case in many cultures. And I do agree that a lot of society right now, we definitely stop valuing the wisdom that comes with age and expertise. But if you look at traditional cultures, like even if you just take the birth example, when women go through birthing, breastfeeding, whatever they're going through, labor, delivery, when you look at traditional cultures, traditional history, women are surrounded by other women. They're surrounded by grandmothers. They're surrounded by their aunts. They're surrounded by their sisters. And it's a community effort to bring a child into the world. It's a community effort to feed this child, to take care of this, to raise the child, right? They say it takes a village because it definitely takes a village. And then you move into sort of, North American society where we're so isolated and we have to do everything on our own. And I have to say, this is not how we were meant to be at all. And so I feel like this is something that I had the privilege of attending many, many births because of the fertility expertise that I had. And I was a doula for many women. And it is such a powerful experience to see what women can go through in that period of time. But it's also interesting to see that over the years and over time, as we become more isolated, women have stopped learning how to believe in themselves, how to trust themselves. They get scared. They don't believe that their bodies can do it. And I've seen women go through incredible things in the middle of labor. Like we have a strength that we don't even realize is there. But when you have other women there who are supporting you, who are telling you, you can do this, like, generations of women have done this and you can also do this. You have that support that is so needed when we feel those doubts. Everyone feels doubts, right? So this is sort of I'm so glad you brought this up because I think it's such an important piece. I also notice that there is a transition that's happening as women start to have kids older. And we go through this sort of fertility journey. A lot of my patients would be in their late 30s, early 40s. And so they were going through this period of time where they were delivering and having babies, but also then approaching perimenopausal changes and years. And it is such a hard transition that I think no one really recognizes. Like
Yeah.
historically, you have your kid in the teenagers or 20 years old, and then you become 40 and you are wise and you have your health and life expectancy was different, but you have a different sort of role in society. And now we're at this other place where, you're 43 and you have a toddler running around. It is not easy to be going through. I tell my teenagers all the time, have you seen that movie Inside Out? You know how they talk about how
Yes.
you're under construction in puberty? And I tell my daughter, I'm like, you're under construction for puberty and I'm under construction on the other side.
Yes. A new system being built.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think that like one of the most, I'm going to go like real authentic right now. So one of the most disappointing things about the birth of my first child was looking at her dad who didn't know what to do or how to support me. And I was like, this is what we've created in society. Like, and it was a really traumatic birth. And this is nothing
Sorry.
against him. This is about this isolation where it's like, okay, you got go to your birth class and that's going to equip you for how to deliver a baby. And then in my case, I went into labor and my water broke and was in active labor in so much pain. And he didn't know that body experience, how to support me. And so then go through the epidural, labor slows down, all of those things, ended up having a shoulder dystocia birth. And what that means is, like the appropriate time to push, it was time to push because I was, fully dilated, but didn't feel any pressure, didn't feel ready, and had been laying down all night and all of those things. And what started as a very fast, after my water broke, everything was moving fast until I got the epidural. I didn't ask for Pitocin. I was given Pitocin without my consent. I actually didn't want Pitocin. They gave it to me anyway. And then, so we're in a situation where my body is not ready. They're telling me to push. And then they used a vacuum to get the baby out. So I don't know exactly what a vacuum looks like, but basically they're trying to pull it
Suction.
out of the body.
Yeah.
Suction. And then in that process, after 3 hours of pushing, when I'm completely drained, have no support, he doesn't know how to be supportive, her head comes out and her shoulders get stuck. And so I remember this nurse jumping on top of me and pushing down on me. And she's looking at me and she's like, you need to push. And she's on me. So anyway, they got her out and they held her up and she's gray and all of the things came with how my body was impacted. She was fine, luckily. But this was a situation for me. I didn't know from my provider until I got pregnant with my second what happened during that birth, where I knew the word shoulder dystocia. And then I joined like a shoulder dystocia support group online and then could see everyone else's experiences and their shared grief and loss and fear and all the things that happened to varying degrees of outcomes. And I think about how much different that birth experience would have been if I had had my sister or my best friend or someone behind me with their legs around me, a very female-centric experience where it could have been just better
Yeah.
for my daughter. And maybe she still would have gotten stuck, but I don't think so.
It's so interesting because I don't know all the stats in the US. I'm in Canada, but in the US especially, but even here, births are so medicalized now. And talk about having a hard time trusting yourself when you're told you have to do something for the health of your baby, for the safety of your pregnancy, you do it. And I think doctors are well intended, but they don't often attend natural births. They don't often labor women the way that we used to labor women back in the day, or the way I would if I was a doula. And I've seen so many births. And I feel like there is a process that maybe we try to avoid the pain, we try to avoid the length of time because it takes time. And as soon as you enter the hospital, like that clock is started and they're like, you got to get out of here. It's a very different model of birthing and even just laying down, putting your feet in stirrups. Like this is not the best position for the mother. It's the best position for the doctor, but it's not the best position for the mother. And so when you think about how we labor, of course we need interventions. Of course we need C-sections in emergency situations. Of course we need all of these things when something happens. But a lot of women don't understand the process before they've had a delivery, and their health providers, I think, also, whether they're not educated, whether they're not experienced in going through this the way that women's bodies were meant to do it, there's vast differences in how a woman labors when you're going through a natural birth. So for example, I had my babies at home and I had to I was in healthcare, so I knew a lot about this, but I was also terrified because my mom had a very similar experience to you. She was given a lot of intervention. And so I was terrified knowing what had happened to her. But also with my medical knowledge, I was like, I want to do this. And of course, if there's an emergency, we can get to the hospital. I had very qualified midwives. I had very qualified doulas. And so I was very confident in how my labor was progressing. But everybody had a comment about how I should do it, why I was crazy to do it this way, and how long it was going to take. My labor was 40 hours. Like if I was in the hospital, somebody would have intervened. But I knew it was going to be long. It was long. She wasn't super well positioned, but I was thankfully lucky to have, that opportunity to labor the way that I was meant to labor, and we had 2 very safe births. And I know this could be very controversial because I'm not saying anything
No.
bad about, healthcare or healthcare providers. I think they just don't learn or don't experience a natural labor in that same way that, say, a midwife would. And so many times we think that it's an emergency, it might not be. And there's all this risk associated, right? So everyone wants to cover themselves. What if
Yeah,
something
they
happens?
have to. I mean, it's the way we structured the
Yeah,
healthcare
and it makes
system.
sense. It makes sense, but also the US has a lot of negative stats,
They're
like
really
they
bad.
really bad stats. And you think about it, like there's got to be something that we can do differently about this whole process. And no wonder we don't trust ourselves. No wonder we don't know how to do this and how to understand our bodies because we're not taught, we're not exposed. This is why actually when I used to doula, I used to do a labor and delivery course for dads because I was like, okay, you should have women there, yes, but also the dads want to be involved. And I wanted my husband there. And I'm like, you should know what to do. You should follow my lead because it's not your body. You should do what I say, but also you should know what to do. And so during my labor, he was filling up the tub and, he was holding me from behind because my arms were so tired. I was going to, I couldn't hold my baby. And he was like literally holding me up because he had learned all of the things my body was going to go through. And I used to do a whole course just for dads. This is how you can support the mother through labor. And a lot of them nowadays really want to be involved. My dad's generation, they weren't even in the room, but now they really want to be involved and they think, oh, well, I'm not really useful. It should be another woman. What am I going to do? And I'm like, actually, you're the person that your wife is looking to or your partner is looking to because she doesn't know any of the doctors in the room. Like she needs to look at your eyes and just be like, I have someone here in my corner. And that is an emotional piece, an emotional security that is really hard to get in that labor situation. So yes, we should be surrounded by women, but if you have a good partnership and that partner wants to be involved, he should learn what you're going to go through so that you can do it together.
I love that. That's such a good perspective. And it's just interesting to me to think overall about like what sort of Western society has created in terms of leaning on interventions and how that takes away from us leaning on ourselves. And that doesn't just translate to the birth process. That's everything. And now as women are sort of coming to terms with this, I think that we have this information generation. We have Gen X they're on social media, they're sharing information and they are seeing the lack of resources and information that they have available to them for things like perimenopause. It makes it so that as we're addressing that issue around perimenopause, menopause, and resources, that then we look back to how our lack of support in birth, pregnancy, postpartum, so that we can as a collective say, no, this is not the right way. This is not the best thing for our bodies. This is not the best thing for trusting ourselves. And I think that the paradigm will shift eventually, but it requires advocacy, support, sharing information, and starts with ourselves and our own ability to trust ourselves. Ask those questions. Is this true? Is this not true? What are my motivations? Is this out of fear? Do I have the right information? And then making the choices from
Yeah.
there.
And I do think things are changing. I have seen a lot more research on women. I'm definitely not even close to how much we need, but it's changing. There are strong voices out there that are advocating. And now with internet, social media, you have so much more access to information that, we never had years and years ago. So I do hope that it'll change. And I do hope that the experience for my daughters will be different than it was for me. And for me, it was different than it was for my mom. But it needs voices. It needs people to speak up for themselves and to ask questions.
Yeah, we need to be the grandmothers that we were
Yes.
designed to be. And that the way, just like the killer whales, the orcas, just like the
Yep.
elephants, that we get to now choose the path that we forge for our daughters. And that's a really beautiful and empowering thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It all starts with us.
It
No
does.
pressure. No pressure. I am so glad that we had the chance to connect today. Our conversation took us into the depths, into the void, and out the other side. And I feel so hopeful knowing that you're in the world, doing the work that you're doing, raising the daughters that you're raising, and that you're my friend.
Thank you. It's so always so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. I loved this conversation.
Well, how can people, okay, wait, actually, two more questions. There's one question that I ask every person that comes on the show, and that is, what are you doing to show up unapologetically?
Ooh, I love this question. Well, I'm really taking care of myself lately. I am really trying to make space and time to take care of myself. I've been more consistent at the gym. I've been trying to love on my body and love on my mental health and really just spend that time recognizing what I need and listening to myself instead of ignoring. I'm trying to walk the talk is what I'm doing. And it is really exciting and powerful and it feels luxurious, but also it feels really empowering.
I love that. Let me know how it goes. I will then walk the talk too. No, I'm trying. How can people find and connect with you and listen to your podcast and your TED Talk and all of the things that you brought into the world? Tell us
Thank
everything.
you. My website is probably the best place, livingxo.com. There's links to my podcast, my TED Talk, I have free downloads, everything, livingxo.com.
Thank you so much for being here today. This has been just an incredible experience. So, for those of you tuning in, please smash that follow button, leave a review. You can contact us anytime at hello@unapologeticallyyours.com. Want to hear from you, want your feedback, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Ashley Logan. This is Dr. Rishma, and we are unapologetically yours.